Welcome everyone for this session. Before we officially start the session, we would request you to switch off your cell phones or keep them on silent mode. This session is going to be 30 minutes long. The format of the session would be 20 minutes for the discussion between our esteemed guests, and the last 10 minutes would be for the question and answers. We would request, as the question and answer session starts, kindly refrain from making any kind of statements, and please keep your questions short and precise. Thank you.
The topic of our next session is Names, a study of personal names, identity and power in Pakistan. The speaker for this session is Mr. Tariq Rahman, and this session will be moderated by Athar Tahir Sahib. So please. Twice the recipient of Petrus Bukhari Award, Athar Tahir is an English language poet, essayist, short story writer, translator and scholar of Punjabi text, as well as a calligraphic artist and art critic and historian.
Thank you. You can hear me at the back? Thank you for coming, all of you. And we are very privileged to have Dr. Tariq Rahman, one of the leading academics of this country. He's a highly published scholar and has to his credit 93 articles in scholarly journals, 10 books, 6 encyclopedia articles, and the list goes on. He is an HEC Distinguished National Professor of Social Linguistics, History, and Professor Emeritus at the National Institute of Pakistan Studies, Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. He was also the director of the National Institute of Pakistan Studies, and Dr. Rahman has been called upon as a guest professor in Denmark, Spain, and Germany. He has been a Fulbright research scholar, 1995-96 at the University of Texas, Austin, and he was also the first incumbent of the Pakistan chair at the University of California, Berkeley, 2004-2005. So we are particularly pleased to welcome him today and to discuss his latest book, which, as you know, is about names. Now, names have a funny business because they connote and denote a lot of things that vary from society to society. So I will ask Dr. Tariq Rahman to first tell us why did he decide to write about names?
Okay, the reason for that was that in 2012 I had finished my last book, 2011, from Hindi to Urdu, a social and critical history. So I didn't know what to do, and I really didn't know what to do. And one day it just so happened that a word, onomastics, caught my attention. Now, because of Latin, in nomine de patria de filii de spiritus sancti, I knew that nom would obviously mean name, and tix would mean the study of, but I knew nothing else about it. So I collected material. I immediately realized that there is no proper study of names in Pakistan, and that names are interesting because they relate to a number of other things, things like identity, like power, like class, like region, like nationalism and so on. Sect, religion, lots of things. So that is why I started this study, because that interest was always there. So that is how I started this study.
The methodology which you use, you talk about names and the fact that very little work on that has been done in this country. But you do mention Anne-Marie Chimel's work on Islamic names, and you use that as a paradigm, I think, to see how, as she says it, there were correct Islamic names and incorrect Islamic names. We'll come to that a little later. But the methodology that you used, because I looked at the method in which you collected information from various sources, and it was a long drawn exercise. Could you dilate a little on the methodology that you employed in order to arrive at some of the conclusions?
Right. First of all, the first problem is to get a review of literature, what other people have done. And I found that there were literally hundreds of articles on it and books. And I got those books. Dr. Ijaz Gilani, I don't know whether he's here. He was the first to give me a book on conversion. and it is that when names change in conversion. So that was the first book, and then there were several others, and then literally hundreds of articles on names. So that's the first thing I did. And as I read it, my heart sank, because I said, well, this is just too much, and I wouldn't know what to write, because I started on the assumption that there's nothing on it, and there was so much on it. But the silver lining in the cloud was that all this was about all countries except Pakistan. Anne-Marie Schimmel, to whom we'll come just now, with the exception of Anne-Marie Schimmel. There was just one report on names from 1883, and that was Sir Richard Temple, who had written a sort of, he called it a dissertation on Punjabi names. But first of all, it was more than 100 years back, and secondly, it was only confined, the names were confined to East Punjab, so there were more Sikh and Hindu names in it. There was a chapter on Muslim names, but apart from that, there was nothing else. So that was the thing. How did I get the data? I got about 800,000 names when I came in contact with a person from the Benazir Income Support Program. And you know how it happens in Pakistan? I don't seem to know anybody. But I went to somebody's house and I said, I can't get names. And this man just rang someone, and here was business, there was Benazir Income Program, and I got the names. and I met a sort of civil servant who gave me the names easily. I tried to approach Nadra, and despite recommendation, I couldn't get names from there, because they thought that with all my subversive writing earlier, I might be misusing the names this time. So they didn't. But they were very nice. They gave me tea several times. So, but not names. Then I used the voters list. They were also reluctant, because I wanted voters list from Balochistan. But they did give me the things. It happened that a personal friend, a colonel in the army, who got those lists for me. And otherwise, I don't know whether I would have got them myself, but there they were. From Balochistan, I couldn't get other names. But then from the list of matriculates, I got them from KP, from the Punjab, and I got them from the 1950s as well as now, because 2012. Because 1950s means those people who were 14-year-old were named in, somewhere in the late 1940s or something in the beginning of Pakistan. So the idea was to find out what changes have occurred in names. Is there such a thing as Islamization? Have names become more Islamic? Have names become more ethnic? Have they become more modern? If so, in what direction? Those kind of things. I also got a list. This was basically stolen, not by me, but by somebody else who wanted to help me, from an elite club of Lahore. Such an elite club that they will not display their, you know which one it is. They will not give their names to anybody, but they were stolen basically, so they came to me. Also from a school, and the criterion was that a school in which the tuition fee per month is 25,000 plus, that would be an elite school, so I got them. And they're very reluctant to give their names. But someone helped me there also. And eventually I found that my secretary could get more names than I could. But I got those names. 1 million names. And then I put them on the computer, and then I took out frequencies like Ali, how many names are there. And this is easier said than done. I was alone doing it, I don't have anyone to help me. Ali, if you put ALI on the computer will get Salim also, Kaleem also, Halim also. Because so you have to eliminate all those in the first and all those in the second, then you get Ali. But you haven't catered for Ali, ALY, and some people spell it as ALY. Then some people spell it ALII and ELY, and so on. So eventually when you get Ali, by that time you've done 5 hours of work. Thank you.
So finding names was also a subversive activity. So quite rightly, some of them, the institutions were not willing to cough up.
I'm sure you'll ask me the question when it becomes subversive, but
after having collected such a large, almost a plethora of information, did you use a special construct, a template, which you applied then? And as a corollary to this question, was there a software which you used in order to find the frequency and the other issues that you were looking at?
Yes, there is. There is a software which somebody told me about, and you put find in it, and it finds things, etc. In between, it plays tricks upon you if you're over 50. But nevertheless, it eventually does work. So there is a software. You asked about the construction, theoretical construction. Of course, power was one, and power. Besides the, I don't know if you have read the definition of power which I gave in my book Language and Politics in Pakistan. It is the capacity to get pleasure, gratification, and the absence of pain. That means if you have power, it is that capacity which will get you a house, which will get you a good car, this and that, etc. Get you better health, better medical care, everything. Also, if you have got this power, you can control other people. And if you have power, you will not let yourself be controlled by others. You can do a lot of good to the world. You can build a dam for them. You can build a house for them. You can help them. You can also harm them. If you have tremendous power, you can throw a nuclear bomb over them, etc. So power is that. But how is that related to names? But there are certain names which in certain situations conjure power and speak of power, in the name of whom people are killed or people are helped, etc. These are names of power. And when within that there is a class aspect of names, in which, for instance, I found out that the names of people in the National Assembly were 3 times heavier than the names of ordinary people. That is, there were 3 components: Sardar, Muhammad Khan, Flana Flan. So that would be a big name, 4 components in it. An ordinary man would be Nathu Khan. So you see, 2 components, or just Nathua. You see, just 1 component. So the onomastic politics is, if you have this kind of plethora of titles and other things, etc., you have an elite identity. So that also, one of the things which I looked at was that. Then class. Then what is Islamization of names? That actually was very difficult, because there were several definitions of it. And I took one definition which was by Gellner of high and low church, which I borrowed here, and then that is the more stricter kind, Deobandi kind of interpretation, Al-Hadith kind of interpretation, and the Barelvi interpretation, the folk interpretation of Islam. So I took those. The names also differ according to that. And then class and so on, other things.
You talk about modernization of
Yes.
society through names.
Yes.
And then you list 3 different categories.
Yes, yes.
Anglicization,
Yes.
and Islamicization,
Yes.
and ethnicization.
Yes.
Could you elaborate these 3 concepts a little more? How
Okay.
do they reflect
Right.
modernity in our society?
Right. When modernity, Professor Chatterjee speaks about it, that our modernity in South Asia, brought by the British, etc., is something which comes accompanied with a certain force and a certain alien kind of element. That is, you have westernized education, etc. So the first one, that of Anglicization, is that certain names British names are not taken up. They are taken up sometimes as pet names and nicknames, etc. But otherwise, British names are not taken up. But what happens is that certain names are deemed as village names, rural names, old-fashioned names. They are discarded. So A.D. Khan is actually Aladita Khan, but does not want A.D. to be counted as Aladita. Nothing wrong with it, but it is the aspect of modernization. In English, initials sound more modern, so A.D. Khan, etc. So that is one aspect of it. By the way, Mr. Jinnah's name, there is underwent several changes. Jinnah Bhoy was discarded, and Jinnah was instead of Jinnah, it became Jinnah. Pronunciation became Jinnah. The original pronunciation was Jinnah Bhoy, and Muhammad Ali became Muhammad Ali, etc. And so that happened, and then M.A. Jinnah. So that is one form of it. That is the Anglicization. The other form, women's names. Women did not take up men's names after their names, but after this, you will find, if at all it was there, and she was a chief's wife or mother, etc., then it would be Khanam. But now Amreen Khan and so on, husband's name and father's name, etc., they were taken up. So the village name remains Flana Bibi. But if she comes to the city, etc., studies, she takes up the husband's name, and very often the husband's first name. Whereas in Britain, of course, it's the second name. Here, the husband's first name. So that is one, Anglicization part of it. The second one, which you mentioned, Islamization part of it. I mean, very often people think that Islam, our adherence to it, is conservatism. But many scholars have agreed that that is not so. One reaction to the dominance of the West, intellectual dominance, emotional dominance, and several other forms of dominance, aesthetic dominance, etc., literary dominance, is to assert some kind of authenticity to it. One of those assertions is Islam itself, and for that matter, Hinduism also. So that assertion sometimes takes the form of taking the names of the Salaf, of the ancestors. That is, certain names become more prominent, and those names are the names which were used in the, in the early Muslims, etc. And sometimes Arabization is taken as Islamization. For instance, the name Dua or the name Safa, Marwa, etc., place names, which are not actually Islamic names, but are taken as Islamic names because they happen to be Arabic and because they belong to the Middle East. So this has happened. And certain Ibn names and son of, etc., those names again fall back to that, fall back a certain kind of assertion. And the last one, nationalistic one, subnational, I should say.
Ethnicity.
Ethnic, that's subnational ethnicity, yeah, ethnicity. Those are Baloch falling back on Baloch names, Pashtuns falling back on Pashto names, and Saraiki also, there are some of those names also. And since especially the name Tahir came up. And after it was, the movement started lionizing Raja Tahir as the defendant of the soil. So after that name Tahir came up. There was a Tahiri tribe earlier, but the name Tahir came up after this also. And so those are assertions. And there are the people who actually take these names for their children. Those are generally in those movements themselves. Bela, Malala, and so on. They are movements. They are people in those movements, ethnic movements sometimes otherwise left-wing kind of resistance movements, and they keep these names in order to constitute a statement against the so-called Pakistani.
It's interesting that you've mentioned the frontier, Balochistan, Saraiki, and Sindh, but you've left out the central Punjab.
Yes.
As we know, Punjab is 100 million population,
Yes.
is the largest province, bigger than so many countries in Africa and Europe.
Yes.
And what is the trend here? Because the normal feeling is that the Punjabi is Punjab's worst enemy. They don't speak their language, they don't teach their children their language,
Yes.
they prefer to speak in Urdu or English,
Yes.
they consider their mother tongue to be something to be used for speaking with servants.
Yes.
So what is the trend here? Do they go back to the original Punjabi names, or do they Persianize them or Anglicize them or Urduize them?
I'm glad you mentioned that. Actually, in fact, my first book, which was called Language and Politics in Pakistan, has a chapter on this movement, the Punjabi movement. And the fact is that it's a very small group. You know that group very well in Lahore, and you yourself have written so much on Bulleh Shah, etc., translated, etc., so you know the movement very well. There's a small group of intellectuals who have considered Punjabi as an asset and have translated their works and used them. But otherwise, this group of very well-read people, intellectuals, these are people who actually know Urdu and English extremely well. So, and it's not that they want to use language as an ethnic identity. It's not that they want jobs, etc., through language. It's not that. It is that they have genuine love, etc., and want to preserve the language for reasons of pride in it, etc. So, but that is a very small group. Such a small group that even if they adopt the name Heer for their daughters, it would be one or two names. So otherwise, a larger movement, the Saraiki movement, is a larger movement. Lesser number of people, but a larger movement. Balochi, very less, but very active, etc. So that's why in the Punjab, this trend is not there.
I'd like to come back to Shimel's Islamic names, which she published in 1969. And she talks about the concept of correctness and incorrectness of names. But just to flag that, we have in Arabic the word Muhammad, the one who's praised. And then we have Mehmet in Turkish, and we have Mamadov in Russian. And I had a Nigerian friend who was called Mamadou. And of course, in Punjabi, we say Mamad. So now, how does that concept of correctness or incorrectness embed itself in the sweep of Islam as it went to various regions and became part of the local belief system and culture?
Okay, Anne-Marie Schimmel actually doesn't talk about the pronunciation so much. She talks about something else, to which I'll come in a moment. Pronunciation is a matter of the phonemes you have and the word forms you have. For instance, Paris is Paris in English. It's not Paris in French. It's Paris. And London is Londres in French. And Germany is Deutschland in German. It's not Germany at all. So those things change, and so those forms keep changing. Sometimes the sound is simply not there. For instance, we do not have, we who speak Urdu or Punjabi or even Pashto and Sindhi don't have the form th with us. You know, the tongue comes out between the two teeth, th and the. We don't have it. Instead, we say tha and the. So we say think and then, not think and then. So those are simply absent. And to have to pronounce the name your own way does not constitute as, not even in the eyes of the ulama, unless they're very serious. Otherwise, not even in the eyes of the ulama, it does not constitute as grave an error, a deviation, as the other thing which I'm going to talk about. And the other thing is taking a form which deviates from the fundamentals as interpreted by High Islam, so to speak. That is, you cannot have a name of God which does not have abd in it. So you can have a name of the Prophet, peace be upon him, which does not have abd upon him. So Rahim is fine, because Rahim is both the Prophet and God. But Rahman is not, because Rahman is the name of God, so it must have abd in it. If you deviate from that, then the orthodox, not the orthodox ulama, actually more of the modern revivalist ulama, they frown upon that. Secondly, you can't have a name like Pirandeta, because that means someone other than God is giving a child. Pir is giving a child. And you cannot have a name like Rasul Bakhsh. I hope my friend Dr. Rasul Bakhsh Rais is not here. Okay. But otherwise, you can't have this name. You can have only Khuda Bakhsh, but not Rasul Bakhsh, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, is not supposed to give children. Only God can do that. Otherwise, it is shirk. So those names are considered shirk, and that's what she's talking about. Anne-Marie Schimmel says that, but then she has tremendous contempt for Pakistanis and Bangladeshis and Indians. He said, these people don't know Arabic. Well, that is obvious. I mean, people don't know Arabic. Anne-Marie Schimmel is a scholar of Arabic. Everyone doesn't know Arabic, but consider that they still want to keep those what they consider Muslim names. So there's some affection in their heart. That's what one must look at.
So taking this argument a little further, names and their names and as indicators of your doctrinal tendencies. Yes. You mentioned Barelvis and Deobandis. How does that figure? What are the trends that you were able to see? What sort of names only the Barelvis and the Deobandis or Al-Hadis, you know, how did their doctrine influence the naming of names?
Okay. Well, basically the certain names that were changed in the modern Deobandi and Al-Hadis Madaris. And I talked to people, interviewed them, and they said that we went to so-and-so alim, he said, तुम्हारा तो नाम ही गलत है, तो तुम्हारा तो नाम ही मुशरिक है, तुम खुद क्या हो? So they had to change their names. Like Muhammad Akbar was a man, I talked to him, he was from a madrasa, which he had actually dropped out of the madrasa, but anyway, he said that, see, Muhammad Akbar means, Muhammad is great, but it had to be Allah Akbar. Only God is great, not Muhammad, compared to God, of course. So he had to change his name. So that kind of onomastic orthodoxy was taught in certain of the modern, especially after 9/11. It seems to me as a sort of response to what they think is Western domination. Also, the name Saddam came up after that. Lots of people with the name Saddam came up after 9/11 or just before it. And Osama, this name rose also soon after that, etc. So Saddam and Osama, and then lots of people after they started getting caught at the border, people started changing the name Saddam also. Now, this is the trend I want you to know. When I went to this office and I said, I want this name because I want to know the change in name. I shouldn't have said that. That's when they stopped giving me the name. Because they said I would be able to write this stuff.
Actually, I was coming to that as a follow-up question, that you've really listed names and you've seen the trends both ethnically and religiously and politically and socially. But have you also seen the reaction to those names by certain societies, by certain countries? And were you able to make some conclusions from that? Because we know anybody who had Muhammad or Osama in his name faced a lot of problems at airports outside the country. I mean, you were taken down, put in a separate room, and then you were interrogated. So is that something that you were aware of, or you
I was aware of that. I mean, there's a chapter in that called Names as Traps. And the whole idea of that chapter is that names can be dangerous sometimes because of what they signal. So, for instance, if you're in the airport and your name is Muhammad Osama, Muhammad Saddam Osama, you are in some trouble. So that sort of thing. But unfortunately, I couldn't get data on that. I did write to I wrote to the US and I wrote to Britain, but they gave me polite answers and not any indicator whether this had happened or not. They said we do not profile, obviously. Well, so I could not put it in the book because you've got to give proof. So I couldn't do that. But from people's stories, of course, that was there. One other thing in Names and Traps is that many Muslims caught in India obviously with a Muslim name was very often killed. And Hindus caught in Lahore in 1947, August, were killed because of their Hindu name. So this is a fact. And people have been brought down from buses because they had Shia names. That's right. Shia components in names, although they are shared. Despite that, Shia components in names, buses were stopped, people were asked to get down and they were shot. This has happened 3 years back. Right. So these names are traps. And very often, one response to that is that people change their names or adopt temporary names. Hindus do that, they call them calling names. And Alia Oud's example, which I've given over there, is a harrowing tale of this girl who called herself Alia. She did an MBA, did extremely well. When people found out that she was a Hindu, she was she was persecuted and she had to leave the job. Similarly, Christians, I have data there. In the 1950s, Christians had more Christian components, so to speak. That is David and so on and so forth. And then they changed those components to neutral, what they call neutral ones. They would take Parvez or something else as their name, etc., to hide the Christian identity. So this has happened, and it's something like 90% Christians have Muslim component, at least one in their name. The Masih component, which is actually a class marker now, has also decreased, except in certain of the villages where Christians are.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Rahman, or I should say Dr. Tariq Abdur Rahman, to conform to certain orthodox practices, for your conclusions and for your insight into something which we normally just take as innocuous, banal thing which really is of no importance. But you can see that how words matter and how the way you use words can have repercussions for you in many ways. We have 10 minutes. I've run out of the more questions that I had for Dr. Rahman, but I'm sure some of you will ask them. So is there anybody who would like to ask a question? Yes, please.
Sir, when we became Muslim, the first thing we did was change our name from Hindwana name to Muslim name. But when the Persian became Muslim from Kafirs to Muslims, they did not change their name. Javed, Parvez, Busharaf, Nasreen, Parveen, all these are Kafrana names. So much so that Meher, Meher. Meher is the name of a deity of the Kafirs, the Mitra. So, sir, how come? Do we have some sort of an inferiority complex as a nation, or are we characterless, shallow people? Secondly, a book published from India gave a list of names which they thought were non-Muslim, although they sounded like a Muslim. It says Sajjad Ali is a non-Muslim name because Sajjad means sajda karna and Ali means you कि आप Ali को sajda कर रहे हैं और Sajjad Haider, Sajjad Muhammad, anyone Sajid. So sir, don't we think while we keep a name, and is there any answer to it, sir? Thank you.
First of all, actually there were many names shared with Hindus, and in our villages some of them are still there. Bhuta, for instance, Bhuta is a village name, it is still there, and also Ghasita. And yeah, these names are still there. Then among women also there are many such names. Reshma, for instance, it's got nothing to do with Muslim or Hindu, but Reshma is there. Then Roshni. And so there are, we also have many names which are not necessarily from Arabia, but which were local names. However, precisely because they are local names, and everything local we sort of look down upon, our languages and our culture and so on, we call them Pendu and so on. So those local names are disappearing. And so Bhuta has almost disappeared. In some village background, some backwater might have it, but it has disappeared because it's a rural marker. And so in Iran there was a lot of pride. It was an empire after all. It was an empire, so there was a lot of pride. And for that reason, there is more likelihood that some names might have been preserved because of that. But since I haven't done research on conversion in Iran, I don't know the exact percentage. When the Sial tribe was converting to Islam, the conversion of names which somebody else has taken out was 20% in the first 50 years, another 10 or 20% in the next. In about 150 years, the names became fully Muslim. And when it says fully Muslim, even then some such names were always there. So the conversion does change names, yes.
We'll take one last question since we are running out of time. I think she raised her hand first.
Thank you very much, sir, for I think it was a wonderful introduction to your book. I'm going to ask two very short questions. One is, did you do research on how the name affects the personality? Because there is this aspect also. And the other one is about the tradition of keeping a name after looking at the Holy Quran. Now that is also very, very prevalent.
Yeah.
And the third one, as I might just add, is that although we have chain names, but some of the traditional names of the clans, I belong to the Janjua clan. When I was a small child, I was shocked to hear that we were Sikhs and whatever, these were our forefathers. But those we have still come to, so we are respectful of some of the names.
Yeah. First of all, the question about name affecting personality, there is no scientific way of doing it. I mean, what personality traits should we take, and then how does one actually, how many years do we give for that to be manifested? Since it is outside the boundaries of science, I can't do it. But somebody else may be able to do this research, but so far there is no scientific work which traces personality and names.
Perceptions are there.
Perceptions are there. One study there is, and one set of studies actually, I should say. It is that if a child is given an unpopular name, then the children around the child make fun of it. And so such children were collected together, and there was a study on them, and the incidents of their suffering, their being bullied, etc., and the consequences of that bullying because of their name, those have been, somebody has studied them. So the consequences of harmful naming, that are there. And that is exactly what, if you use the term Paki to somebody, this is just what happens. You are then stigmatizing the person, and that has consequences. That has been studied. So, I mean, using bad language to people, stereotyping them, calling someone Paki in England, or calling someone Bania, if he's Hindu, etc. Those are definitely bullying terms, and they do have bad effects. But the other one you asked, the other question was tradition. Oh yes, yes. Names through the Holy Quran. Yes, that is done, and of course that several things. Through the Holy Quran, it's done. Through certain other things also. Even Diwan-e Hafiz was used for this purpose. So, but mostly the Holy Quran. Yes, that is done.
We come to the end of the session, but please stay because Dr. Rahman is going to talk about his other book and a totally different aspect, history of English literature in Pakistan, which has just been reprinted. So you can hear more of his erudite insights into the way literature in English flourished in this country in the early years. Thank you very much.